Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode. Thanks for tuning in again. I'm sitting down here in the basement bait shop repairing a couple of broken rods. They were out of commission at the end of last year and just nothing major. Just need to replace a couple of tips, replace a couple of guides, and get them back into working order for this upcoming season. Pretty simple stuff, but something that needed to happen if I wanted to utilize the rods again. So we've got that done. And while I was doing that, I was thinking quite a bit about some of my upcoming tournaments and just how I want to approach them with the spring season that we're going to be in. And it had me thinking quite a bit about fishing points. Points are one of the best fish holding locations that you can fish. The problem is there are tons and tons of points, and not all points hold fish. And it's something that I've gotten questions on about how I break down different bodies of water, especially during the pre-spawn process. So that's kind of what I wanted to talk about in this episode. Before I do get into it, I do want to remind you guys that if you're looking to purchase some tackle, click the link in my description to therealshot.com. If you use the discount code Stefan10, you'll get 10% off your order, and it helps the channel out. You get a discount on some price. It helps a local bait shop out as well, so everybody wins on it. And a lot of the tackle you can be looking for to fish some points you can find at therealshot.com. So check that out. All right, guys. So what I wanted to talk about today was how do you determine the best and juiciest looking points? Some lakes have thousands and thousands of points, which makes it so difficult to break down. And the first thing that, in my opinion, you need to be looking for is the location of the point. So what I mean by that is there anything located around that point that the fish are going to be going to or coming from? So if we're talking pre-spawn, so let's talk pre-spawn in this case, I'm going to be looking for points that are going to be outside of spawning coves. So either it's a primary point, so it's where they're coming from in their wintering location, main lake stuff, so they're moving towards the spawning areas. So the first major point off of the main lake leading into where they're spawning is a great place to be looking for. Once you're back into those spawning areas, you're going to be looking for any of those secondary points that are set up right outside of the spawning location. So, if you've got a little creek that's coming in, or just a little bay off of a main creek channel, those are the type of places that a lot of fish will pull up and spawn. Just the small, what I call the little side nipples, the little indents off of a creek arm. To me, those are more ideal spawning locations than all the way in the very back of a creek. But the points outside of those are what you're going to be looking for. So there's, the location is key. If you're talking about pre-spawn fish, you may not want to fish, like some of the most main lake points that are on do-nothing banks, because the fish aren't moving to that bank. They're probably moving away from that to get into some of the back bays and the spawning areas. So you want to make sure that you understand location. That point that's more main lake, that doesn't have anything else really around, may be a great summer point, but it won't be a great pre-spawn point. And, vice versa. The points that are good in the pre-spawn may not be good summer points or fall points. So you want to recognize time of season as to what point that you're after. That's a huge thing. Once you've identified a point that you're looking for, there are several characteristics that you want to be looking for on that point. The first is any isolated cover. So when I say isolated cover, I'm talking, is there a rock patch? Is there a brush pile? Is there a road bed that crosses it? Is there a weed clump? Any sort of isolated structure on that point. To me, that is so much better than finding a point that is all rock or all weed. That's just not at that point, you're no longer casting to a specific spot. You're casting to a whole point, and the whole point could hold fish. What you want to find are the sweet spots on that point. So that's one of the most important things. Another characteristic that I like to look for is there a shelf on that point? So most points will taper out, But is there a point on that taper where all of a sudden you get a little bit of a shelf and then it continues to taper? Those shelves are high percentage spots that the fish like to sit on. In my opinion, most bass species would rather sit horizontally over horizontal ground versus suspend off of a point, that's going at a 45-degree angle. It just seems like it gives them a little bit of a place to sit and wait for the next forage to swim by. That's another great point. You want to be looking for points that have forage on them. Those bass are utilizing those points to feed up for the spawn during the pre-spawn. So what you're trying to find are points that not only are set up good for the bass to move back into their spawning rituals, but also points that are also bringing bait fish to them because they're using those points to feed up for the spawning process. So you want to find one that's got forage as well. Another characteristic of a point that I really like are steep contour lines. So if you have a point that is pretty consistently tapering out, but in one section you get a steep contour line change. So you may have 45-degree, contour lines going all the way out, and then you have a little bit of a steep drop off the point where you get the tight contour lines. Those are really good places to concentrate. And the reason for that is the steeper the contour lines, the easier it is for fish to push bait fish into that wall, basically, because it's a steep contour line, and it makes it easier for them to feed. If they're pushing bait up onto a point that is, relatively flat, the bait fish can spread out and go all over the place. If they chase them into a wall, and this is why bluff walls are so good, the bait fish can only go in a certain direction. They can't go through the wall. So that gives the bass a better chance at corralling the bait fish against the wall. That's why the steep contour lines are so good on a point. It's really important. Here's an example point that you can see has a ton of the characteristics I'm looking for. It's got a roadbed that clips through the tip of it, and the roadbed is so key during the pre-spawn process because the roadbed will allow the bass to use that road as a travel route to go from wintering location to spawning location. So in this case, those fish can get on that roadbed and follow it, and a roadbed will always lead to shore. At some point, it comes up out of the lake. And a lot of times the best roadbeds are the ones that come up out of spawning coves. So in this case, you've got a roadbed that is bringing fish to that point. Inside of that point, you've got some islands with shallow spawning water that make it ideal. There's a contour line change that is really good in one area of that point. You've got a little bit of a shelf in another point. There's a lot of good features on this point that make that a high percentage looking spot to me. The next point over from that had nothing different. It was a simple standard point, 45-degree banks, nothing stood out on it. So to me, you want to go fish a point like this one that's going to give you a lot of really good places to concentrate your casts. So once you've found a point like that, the baits that you're going to be looking for, in my opinion, you've got two different sets of baits. You have more of the top of the point versus the bottom of the point. If you've got active fish that have slid up on top of the point, up in shallower water, baits like a jerk bait are great. A Ned rig is a great bait. A wacky rig or shaky head can be great baits. But if you have inactive fish, or you're earlier in that pre-spawn process where they're really just pulling up out of deep water and those fish are down in that 20-foot or deeper range, at that point, I like throwing swim baits. I like throwing crankbaits, Carolina rigs. A great tip with a Carolina rig is if you are fishing fish that are deeper, set up on top of the point and throw to deeper water and drag your Carolina rig up the point. You'll get a lot of additional strikes by doing that. And a lot of times what people don't realize, when fishing a point, they're actually sitting over the fish and casting shallower and reeling their bait in before the bait gets to the fish. If you set up shallow and throw deep, you're throwing your bait out to where the fish are and bringing it through them, and then reeling your bait in when you're sitting on top of the point where the fish aren't even at. So it's a good tip to remember when fishing points. It seems to work really well for that. But that's how I break down points, guys. Especially in the pre-spawn, points can be great locations. And if you have a point like that example I showed you where you've got travel routes coming to it, those are the types of points that will continuously reload and hold up after the spawn, because a lot of times those same points that were good during the pre-spawn are good in the post-spawn when those fish are coming back out from their spawning locations back towards the main lake or deeper water where they're going to set up for their summer haunts. So I hope this was helpful, guys. If it was, hit that like button, share it on your social media, and stay tuned for tomorrow's tip. It's another good one. Thanks for watching.